It's my absolute pleasure to introduce our first of our presenters for today. Jacynta Fuamatu has joined us from 350 Pacific, and we all know, obviously, that when it comes to the climate emergency, it's in the Pacific where we are seeing the effects being felt, obviously currently and obviously into the very near future. So I don't think I need to explain that to you. I've got someone that's actually much better than doing that for us, and to talk about the work of the Pacific Warriors, the Pacific Climate Warriors. Please join me in welcoming Jacynta Fuamatu. Cheers.
Good morning, everyone. So of course, I'd just like to quickly take this opportunity to firstly acknowledge the traditional owners of this land on which we meet. I pay my respects to the elders, past, present, and those emerging, and I'd also like to acknowledge that we are on stolen land and that sovereignty was never ceded. So my name is Jacynta. I am of Samoan descent, born and raised here in Australia. I am a Pacific climate warrior of a grassroots network called 350 Pacific. Our purpose is shared with our local and national team 350.org Australia and the global team 350.org. So 350 is our golden number, and it represents climate safety. It's a science number, and it represents the CO2 in the air. So I think it's read as 350 million parts in the air is the safe climate that we need to breathe or live. And at the moment, we are a little over 400 parts per million, which I guess you could say we are being challenged to reduce that number. And it's a climate crisis, but I guess today it's more important because it also represents climate emergency. So it is an honor to be here today. This gathering is a form of community engagement, which is a vital part in not only addressing climate change, but also tackling it. You may have seen or heard of a phenomenal spectacle over the weekend. Last Saturday was the September the 8th, which was the Global Day of Action. And this year it was about rising for climate. And only 3 days after that, we are here gathered to start on a beautiful journey on what true climate leadership should look like. And I guess just to summarize that weekend, in Australia, a little over 5,000 people took part in over 50 events around the country, and globally that's a little over 500 events that saw thousands and thousands of people gathering and mobilizing in cities around the world. Events didn't just take place on land, there were also a lot of actions that took place on the ocean. So actions and events like this play a huge part in climate action, and this is where we work together to plan strategies to ensure a clean, safe, and secure future for everyone. Investing time and resources into our local communities must be included in these plans. Climate change is not just a local problem or a national issue, it's a global problem, and it requires everyone to be a part of the solution. How this works or how this looks in my short journey in the climate movement, the weekend is definitely an example of that. We didn't just have people meet at the same street with banners. We didn't just have people paddling their canoes across the ocean with a powerful message demanding climate leadership. This took months and months of working with communities on the ground. We had a campaign last year for COP23 in Bonn, Germany, and it was called Have Your Say. And we spelt say as in S-E-I, which is a Pacific word for the flower that we wear in our hair or behind our ear. And I guess at the conference in Bonn, you just see everyone wearing business suits, walking into these negotiation spaces. And towards the end of the conference, we had almost everyone wearing a flower in their ear. And it may have been a simple act, but it took months and months of planning to ensure that we made sure that these leaders thought of the Pacific in these spaces. And having the symbol of the flower represents resilience. And it was a powerful, powerful visual for us. And my favorite campaign was the canoe versus coal. And You know, we didn't just have people in kayaks in Newcastle paddling out in the water. It took months, even a year, to plan with people on the ground to ensure that the message to our government here in Australia understood what climate action looks like. And that was in 2014. It was the first time I really learned about climate change. I also just learned that the largest coal exporter in the world was in Newcastle, in New South Wales, which just happens to be the state I was born and raised in. I was really lucky to witness a group of young Pacific people who boldly sent a direct message to our Australian government. They had with them their traditional canoes that were built specifically for this event to physically stop coal ships for a day. They disrupted business for a day, these young people. They knew of the impacts of climate change and they understood the power of the fossil fuel industry, and they stood powerfully in their truths. This event inspired me, but it also made me feel a bit ashamed. Ashamed to be both an Australian and a Pacific Islander, because I felt that these kids didn't have to travel all the way here to do that. I thought, if our people, if our communities were aware of the situation, that would have been us out on the water stopping coal ships. And so I've been determined since then to be a part of this crisis. Fast forward 3 years and I'm marching in the street with hundreds of our Pacific diaspora community. I'm bringing climate action to the fashion world with climate couture outfits from Sydney to Papua New Guinea, and I was fortunate to take it to Germany. I am part of a growing network that is making change using their artistry, poetry, gardening, painting, and I'm seeing Pacific leaders now even challenging and holding our Australian leaders accountable for their inaction on climate change. I'm seeing more Pacific people engage in climate change talks, which is something that was very hard to do because climate change is associated with the Western world. It's a science word, and there is no Pacific word for climate change except that the water is rising. All this happened because we spent time with our people on the ground, our communities, and we invested resources into them to build a movement. And along the way, we have been fortunate to work with amazing communities and organizations who have shown not only solidarity, but become strong allies with us. No matter which way you attack climate change, it always starts with the people on the ground. Climate action is a battle over power, not just the energy type, but it's a type that's about taking back that power that the fossil fuel industry has over our society. It's important to empower our community to push for a clean and safe world. The work done locally contributes to the work nationally, and this initiative today will create a ripple effect that calls on urgent leadership. Even now, after the shuffle in our parliament, only proves why climate leadership is important. This conference is creating opportunities to build collaborations for advocacy and influence across the government, industries, and organizations that have the greatest power to take urgent climate action. To build a new, more equitable zero-carbon economy, one, you need to promote investments in community-based sustainable solutions. 2, support communities facing impacts of climate change. And 3, build strong solutions for an economy free of fossil fuels. With these in mind, know that it also supports the work in keeping fossil fuels in the ground, and it puts pressure on our government. If we don't challenge the system, then we don't change the system. Include the people of the community, learn how they run things, immerse yourself in their actions, in their cultures. Demonstrate leadership by empowering them to be a part of the vision and the direction that the city wants to take. You can't be a leader if your community does not support or are not a part of these plans. And I think our government is a prime example of that. Thank you.